And so checking with a collateral. So a collateral is someone who can back up the parent's story of they are doing well by their children are safe. Okay, so it's literally, it's a reference to your job as a parent, to our clients as our family's jobs as a parent. So collaterals would be you guys sitting in this room, because if you guys are the ones working with families and you know their ins and outs, or you know what's been going on for them, you can speak to the things that they've tried, the programs they've completed, how well they've been doing, and if they have criminal charges, how well they've been doing in clearing that up. If they're new immigrants to the country, how well they've been trying to get accustomed to everything going on around them, what their challenges may be. That's what a collateral can bring to the table for a family. It's a reference to how well is this family doing at this point in time. So just like we have here, they can speak to how engaging a family can be, either with the school, the daycare, the healthcare system, and they can speak to the way children react to parents. So like say daycare, if my nephew's daycare people will say, Grandma or Grandpa are here, my nephew's gone. He doesn't know anybody else in the room. Grandma and Grandpa are here, he's gone. He's walking to them, big smile on his face, and my parents have his coat, and he's out the door with them. Versus if you have a child who like may see mom or dad or whoever, and they like still kind of cling on to their daycare worker instead. But when you see a kid who's like, hey, mom, dad, grandma, auntie, I'm gone, guys. That speaks tons, especially when you have a child, you know, like our younger children. They're not gonna have the vocabulary to sit there and say, you know what, I am so happy at home with my parents. They ensure all of my needs are met. They can't say that to you, right? But when you see a kid who's like happy, you know, everything, the backpack's filled, they've done their artwork, they say they love everybody, and they're happy to see mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, that's a kid who's telling you something about themselves and what their connections look like to their parents and their family. And that's something a daycare staff can then say, if child welfare has called for a collateral check, that's something they can speak to, right? Or if the kid's late and daycare, mom and dad call daycare, or mom and mom, whoever called daycare to say they're gonna be late today. You know, we had kind of a late start, we had a rougher morning, this is what their attitude may be like this morning. And the daycare can say, you know what, mom and dad always lets us know what's going on with the child first. They always tell us what's going on. We know how the kid's gonna be. The kid's got, you know, their transitions are always really simple, really seamless. It's good to go. That's what a collateral check would look like. So earlier when I was talking about safety and risk assessments, I said I'd come into a little bit more content about them. So as I said before, it's a tool that is completed within 24 hours of speaking to a child. It's a series of 14 questions, and there's going to be 3 outcomes: safe, safe with intervention, or not safe. Safe, great. Safe with intervention, which means you've had to create some type of a safety plan, and then not safe means the child's being apprehended. We do not like to go with not safe as child welfare because we want kids to be able to stay at home, but as long as they're going to be safe in the home. But again then, who's judging that the child's safe? That's where the inconsistency can come into play, is who is judging if this child is safe? Who's checking off these boxes? Who's answering these questions? Which perspective are they answering these questions from? That's where, you know, depending on who your child welfare worker, the child welfare worker is, that's where things can become a little bit more tricky. Then we have the risk assessment, which determines if the child's at risk for abuse or neglect. And I spoke to the 4 levels, with being low, moderate, high, or very high. And that's 10 of 10 questions that get answered. So then we have closes or transfers. So how a file, the trajectory of a file, pretty much. So once the phone call's made, there's the decision to open the file. Your investigation's gonna start. You're going to complete your assessments, so the safety assessment, your risk assessment, and you're going to check with some type of a collateral who's going to know this child and or family. If there's no safety concern, the children are safe, reports written, files closed. Done. Thank you very much for your time. Sorry we intruded. Hope everything goes well. Now, if there are concerns and there is risk, there's transfer to an ongoing worker or what's known as a family service worker. It just depends on the agency for your area. They can change the terminology that they use. From there, service goals are created, there's monitoring, and then hopefully the risks are being decreased. Whatever was deemed as a risk is being decreased so that the child protection concern can be decreased or eliminated to the point that a file can then close. Okay. And so what we have here are the rights of children and young persons receiving service. So what we have here are child and youth, they must be informed. And so they are informed of their rights, they're informed of review processes, they are informed of the complaint process, their responsibilities. So if a child comes into care, they're given their rights. Their rights around, they have the right to education, to privacy, to be able to practice their religion, to be appropriately sheltered, fed, clothed, all of those things that are we all see as pretty much basic human rights. Then they also have responsibilities. Some of those responsibilities are to follow the day-to-day rules of the home, to attend school, to complete their chore if there's like a chore list for the house. We have that stuff. So it says here, rules governing day-to-day operations in residential care, including disciplinary procedures, which could be the loss of privileges. And we know how much technology is really in the hands of our youth these days, and taking away their technology is, like, we've seen what some of that looks like in the meltdowns over loss of technology and who they can and cannot contact and how important it is. And youth are admitted to residential placements, and at regular intervals, including the regular intervals that may be prescribed in the regulations. So there's meetings that take place, so they have the right to call their workers. They have the right to participate in what's known as their plan of care, which is done at certain times of while a child is in care to make sure that the child's needs are being met while in care. And if there is something the child states, well, you know what, I want more fitness in my life. Okay, great. Well, part of plan of care is health. So then what can we look at in terms of you wanting to have more fitness in your life? Or, you know what, I would like to start practicing my religion. Okay, great. What do we need to do to make that successful for you? Or I've changed my eating styles and I've decided I'd like to be a vegetarian. Okay, so what is it that we need to do to ensure that you can continue to have that happening? Or, you know what, I'm not doing so great in math class, I need a tutor. Okay, great, we're gonna get you the tutor. Children in care also now have the right to receive instruction in the, children and youth in care now have a right to receive instruction in and participate in activities of their choice regarding their creed, community identity, and cultural identity, whereas before it was restricted to religious instructions and activities. So remember before when I spoke about the Child, Youth, and Family Services Act and there being some amendments and some changes, and I said that things used to be a lot more broader in the act in terms of identity. These are some of the pieces that have been added. So around creed, community, and cultural identity. That way kids can have the opportunity to know more about who they are if they are in care. Now, if you have African Canadian children and they're in care in Oshawa, or they're in care in North Caledon, because we're in Peel, are there a lot of services there for African Canadians? No? Is it fair to say no across the room? So how is that need going to get met by the Peel Children's Aid Society since those children are in their care? So that's where the hiccup on something like this comes. Because again, you would read this and it's neutral. A kid's in care, they get to have these needs met. They have the right to participate in having these needs met, and it's supposed to be done because it's their right. Okay, great. So find something in the community for them. There is nothing. Or there's a wait list because it's such a small agency, or it's an agency that has to look at renewed funding every March 31st and April 1st. And based on the government at hand, they may or may not get that. Now where are you going to use the child welfare agency? Because to send them to, say, to Toronto, anybody here knows what the 401 looks like, anywhere between 3:30 and 5 o'clock on Monday to Friday. Are they going to be able to get to their program? So those are some of your hiccups in something that seems really simple and neutral. If the child's in care, we got to make sure we meet their needs. If their needs are on cultural identity, find something. Where are you going to find it? I'm getting calls from places like Thunder Bay, and they're asking me, so what's up here? I don't know. And in some situations, there isn't anything. So then how is this need, which seems neutral, then being addressed? So it's not being addressed, which means the whole entity of the child is not being addressed. And was it being addressed when they were at home? Possibly. But when they were at home, they weren't in your care, which means the legislation doesn't apply to the parents. So you see how that ends up now from what seems like a really neutral statement, well-intentioned, how then when you then put an anti-Black racism lens on something like that, it does not work. It doesn't work for this population. And I'm not even bringing in intersectionalities. I'm just talking just straight African Canadian. No intersectionalities included. Then throw in an intersectionality. So now where is that child who identifies as the LGBTQ plus community, plus being Black, where are they going? Because you need to ensure it's a safe space for both those parts of their identity. Then you need to make sure that it's also accessible for someone who may have some form of a disability, whether it's a physical disability or an invisible disability. So then how are those pieces getting met? So you see how this great neutral statement, we can pick it apart, that it ends up not being neutral based on the intersectionalities that you put on top of being African Canadian. So we're really ahead of time, but that's a good thing always, because it leaves more time for questions. So do we have any at this point?
How are they managing those caseloads to ensure that a worker can do child welfare versus child protection?
That's going to be different for every Children's Aid Society, because caseloads and casework vary from child welfare agency to child welfare agency. And it depends on what initiative they're taking forth in terms of how do they best service the populations in their community in order to do more child welfare work, which is looking at the strengths. So like, again, the agency in which I work for, and other agencies have picked it up too, working from, say, a signs of safety framework or a trauma-informed practice framework, to really start to look at what has this family gone through, what have they worked with, what has worked with them, and does that help to decrease the amount of work that needs to be done with the family to ensure safety, so that that's a family that hopefully their file can close, or if it does need to transfer to ongoing service, the appropriate services are in place so that the family can then continue to move forward in life.
Yes.
Just around the responsibilities of the child, you mentioned some things that they should be doing, but I find that a lot of those same issues are issues that probably got family.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Oh,
So
yes.
are those reinforced to the child at any point, like, this happened, you were called, but even if you go into care, you have to understand that you still have a responsibility to go to school. Your parent is, maybe these arguments are coming up because of the fact that you aren't waking up to go to school.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then the other thing was the rights. So let's say a parent doesn't have the resources to get their child into some of these cultural activities. When they're on their own, when they're in care, they have access to it. But can Children's Aid help a parent as part of the plan, I guess, if they end up staying in the system, to assist them with getting into some of these activities that
Again, depending on your region and depending on if your family is living in what's known as a high priority neighborhood versus not. I know as part of a service plan when I've worked with families, what can we get kids into? So if supervision is an issue, okay, so are there after school programming we can put the kids into? Because then now we've removed the issue of supervision, right? If the educational stuff is an issue, what is the school prepared to do in order to help this child be more successful? Okay, it's that kind of stuff. So anybody who's doing the ongoing family service work, they do see it in the best interest of the family as a whole to be able to ensure that activities can be put in place. Sometimes it's about wait lists. So then there are workers who will write letters stating this would be in the child's best interest and throw out some of those catchphrases like child's best interest, child safety, creating strong families, which then tend to push families along in terms of wait lists. Did you want to say something? So for everybody who doesn't know, this is Kika Ojo.
First of all, hats off to Judy for amazing work. Amazing. So proud of you. So excited about this initiative or this part of One Vision, One Voice. I see a lot of familiar faces. Hello to everyone. Much love to you. For those of you that don't know me, I am the lead of One Vision, One Voice. Just so excited that we're able to do this piece. As we kind of enter into the twilight of our this phase, of phase 2. But just on the last question, and Judy, you've done an excellent job, and just again, hats off to you. I had a thought that we can kind of consider systemic anti-Black racism work. And so this session that we've done, we did one at JCA, as I'm sure Judy shared, and today's, and we have a number of other sessions due, and we hope that you share with your peers across the province, is really about how you specifically help families. And I guess the hat I want to put on and sort of the encouragement I want to offer you is about how you think about your roles personally in your organization. So those of you that are here representing an organization as opposed to as an independent, but even the independents should be also thinking about, so when you even talk about programming for families and how to get access if they don't have resources, fantastic question. So for those of you that are attached to agencies, where you have the opportunity to weigh in on what kind of programming those organizations create, produce, offer, and how they make those accessible, you need to be thinking about how you use your voice inside of your organization. That's the systemic anti-Black racism work, right? So the narrative is, yes, we always do it this way. We want to start asking questions in our organizations that say, who does this help when we do it this way? Who is left out? Who thinks this is great? Who doesn't? And so that's more likely going to be asking these organizations to look at data, disaggregated data, and in the case of in the case of issues of anti-Black racism, we want to be thinking about disaggregated race-based data in particular, right? And asking the question, who's faring, like, how are people enjoying or accessing this programming that we're doing, and then how do we make it accessible? How do we create programming that is relevant specifically to this community? And it's not because One Vision, One Voice is for Black people. It is not because Kika is Black. It is because who you serve the most, and who your own data says that you serve the worst, ultimately. That's why we respond this way. So it's about responsive programming. And if you feel too at risk in your organizations, I understand what it's like to be the only one. So if you feel isolated and concerned about that, think about collaborating with other staff members. Have conversations. There is nothing to stop you from booking a room on a lunch hour and having a conversation that starts the ball rolling, and really think in terms of collectivism, right? And together you're stronger than if you were as an individual attempted to make that kind of move. So I don't want to take the mic from you, but I want to encourage more questions and maybe conversation because we're so ahead of time, and then Judy or I can answer accordingly. So, yeah, Ms. Valerie, hi.
One of the questions I had was about getting this information into the educational system, the school boards. I know these seem to be designed for community agencies, but because I know that a lot of the calls that are made to Children's Aid are done through one or other at the school board, how do we get this information to the school board?
When you say get the information to the school board, is it for the teachers, the EAs, the social workers? Okay. That might be a great project for phase 3. See, the assumption of the sector, child welfare, is that they know. And the reason that that's the assumption, right, is because they get trained. So when I became a high school teacher here in Peel, we got training on child welfare or CS. Are there other teachers here or anybody from education other than Ms. Valerie? Yeah, okay, so a couple of you from education. So teachers get trained on duty to report. That's usually the extent of it, to be honest. So you make a fair point. We did want to do a mandated refers table. So all the mandated refers, we did want to do that like a monthly or maybe 3 or 4 times a year type thing, so that we could have these sorts of conversations. But these are all things that have to be funded by the ministry. So vote. I say vote differently, but just vote. So other questions? And the other thing I would say, Ms. Valerie, is that child welfare, like every other sector, is a responsive. When I say that, I just mean that for me or my staff to say we need to do this next is very different than if the community, again, collectivism. Don't write the letter alone. Write it with your local whatever organization. Congress of Black Women can write the letter, et cetera, et cetera. Like, it doesn't have to be you as an individual. So whatever collectivity you belong to, let them write the letter saying exactly these things. We need this, we want this, and copy everybody. Copy the ministry, all the people in the ministry. This is how social change happens.
Yep.
Other questions or comments?
We have like a million questions.
now the food has settled in right here.
Address that because there's an understanding that the relationship between the Black community and CAS isn't a good one, and so when thinking about when families are looking for resources, CAS doesn't seem like the friendly face to provide that like unconditional support without being reprimanded later on.
So like I said before, the files stay alive for a long time. So whether it's a concern that goes on to a full investigation or it's a parent who's calling in to say, look, these are the issues I'm having with my kid. Do you know what I can access in my community? Yes, that call is written down. It's typed down. It goes into the system. But it doesn't show up the same way as a full investigation would show up, okay? So when you start to then look at, you know, Mrs. So-and-so called or Mr. So-and-so called, and their concern was around having an issue with having a reunification issue. We'll just throw that out there as an example. So they were referred to agency ABC, which works on reunification, and they were happy with that information. That's all they were looking for. And so that referral has closed at intake screening as a community link, versus if it's a file that then needs a full investigation, as I spoke to with talking to children, parents, a community collateral, and then possibly referring to an organization that may do reunification work or behavior management work, or maybe it's connecting with food banks or helping with housing, like any of those kind of stuff, then that's what would sit longer. But again, there's still something written where it's going to show this was a concern, this was the outcome. And then you can, like a worker who's in the child welfare system currently, so I'm a worker, but I'm not currently in child welfare, so I wouldn't have access to the system. But a worker in the system could then click and see, oh, Mrs. So-and-so or Mr. So-and-so called because they were having problems with their kid, and they took the information about the reunification program, and we spoke that same day and closed it down. Versus the investigation, this was the outcome, and we were able to close it down at the 30-day mark. Or it was a file, we had to transfer to ongoing service, services were put in place, goals were met, and we closed down the file. So every time there's an occurrence, as they call it, something is written, but when you click on it, it's going to give you a brief synopsis of what it was, which is then going to help to make it's going to help a worker determine, oh, well, this family's been trying, they've been engaged, they've reached out for support, and maybe still things haven't been shaping up the way they hoped it would, so they need some extra support or some extra help, or something else needs to happen.
And how long does that first?
Yeah, I think so.
Is that what the first one you explained? How long is that in the system for?
Same amount of time.
99
99
years.
years. Everything's 99 years. It's a long. It is a long time. Yes.
Is that the same with, I know people can call intake just for inquiries about if they should be reporting something?
So that's when they don't share names. So when you call in to do a consult, you, like most referrers will say, I'm doing a consult, I want to see if this is a child protection concern. If the answer is then yes, then that's when you give all the identifying information. And if the answer is no, it's like, great, I learned something new, thank you very much. And there's nowhere really to, like, that just shows up as consult, and but the same consult sits there, but there's no name on the consult.
We'll ask for a name though.
Pardon?
We'll ask for a name.
As in the referrer or the consult?
So the intake worker asks, even if they say this is not a duty to report, they will still ask you if you want to give the information.
Okay.
You can say
No, you can say no, right.
you ask.
Mm-hmm.
And if you did, would that be then recorded as?
Yeah,
and it
it's
would
still
be
recorded, yes. I know my colleague over here.
We can no longer make no-name consults to the Children's Aid Society. If we call in, we have to say who we're calling about. And maybe part of it is, there's so much stuff that's just flying through my head. I wish that we could have a conversation with our teaching staff and the CAS workers. Because I have to tell you that I was a CAS worker for a long time. I was a child abuse intake worker. I did this for a long time. I've been a school social worker for a long time. And one of the things that I find most distressing is how CAS workers talk to parents. I'm sorry, but that drives me to distraction. And I had a conversation recently with a CAS worker, and because my name doesn't sound Black, I'm sure she assumed that I was white until she saw me. And then it was like, oh, she started to backpedal on how she was talking to me. And I was very upset because I thought, isn't there somewhere along the way where we learn how to talk to people, that we talk with respect to people, and that you say to a mom who is saying, I want to be a good mother. I don't want you to take my kid away. Help me. I don't understand how the parent saying that to the CAS worker ends up with the CAS worker saying, if I take your child into care, you'll get the child back when I'm ready to give you your child back. Whoa, back up. So I think there's a lot of conversation that needs to happen. And I'm lucky I am on a team of social workers where 5 of us are Black in a community that's mostly white. But our social work department is it's very diverse, and I think it's because we have a very progressive Black chief social worker. And it just frustrates me more and more when we don't have a lot of Black families in the community in which I work, but it just frustrates me to no end that CAS workers so often, my experience is that they talk down to the parents. They don't believe that the parents know what's best for their kids. That, yes, I'm sending my child with a patty because guess what? It tastes good, it's good for them, and that's what they like, right? So I send my kid with peanut butter and jelly every day. Who cares? There's so many bigger things. And I just feel like if we could have a conversation, if the teachers, the social workers, and parents, Black parents could sit in our community and talk about what the issues are, that we may be able to move further ahead.
So one thing I want to say is, for any time, if you ever hear a worker say to a parent, I will decide when you should get your child back, you tell their supervisor, you tell a director of service.
And her supervisor was sitting right
Then
beside
tell a
her.
director of
And
service
I
if the
said-
supervisor doesn't say anything.
And I said, that's not happening.
Because it's the judge who decides when the child goes back. If mom and mom, dad and dad, grandma, whoever that primary caregiver and the child was removed from has met every single thing on the service plan or the whatever order is in place, there's nothing that says the child shouldn't go. They've done everything that's been asked of them to improve the child's safety based on what the society deemed the child wasn't unsafe for. They do not have the power or the decision to be able to say, I will decide when you get your child back. If I was to remove a child from somebody's care as a child protection worker, I have to explain myself to a judge within 5 days. And that judge may look at me and say, Miss Powell, you better return those children before the end of business day. Or the judge may say, Miss Powell, I understand what's happened here. Please ensure you're working with this family to the best of your ability to ensure that these children return back sooner than later. No child protection worker can just do whatever it is they please. They do not have carte blanche over any population or over any family. They have someone that they have to be held accountable to, which is the court system. They have to be.
And that's the message they have to give people. Because
Yes,
parents
think that the worker is the end all and be all.
They're a vulnerable situation.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, too often, it's been my experience, too often, this person comes and tells you, this is what I'm going to do, and you have no control.
And then
That's not fair.
No. And the other hard part is, so you have a child protection worker who has just removed your children from your care for a parent, but then turns around and tells you, so can you come to court about, say, 9:30, because court starts at 9, and I want to ensure your name gets up on the duty counsel list so you can speak to a lawyer. And you know what? Do you want me to pick you up because I know you don't know where the courthouse is? Or do you want me to bring you bus fare so you're able to get to and from court? Or is there any way you can bring to court with you to support you and help you through this? So on one side, you're following the legislation, right? You're following this legislation, all these rules, procedures, policies, and then the other side, you're somewhat trying to help this family navigate on how to get to court and how to get through the court process. And it's extremely hard to be both, because as someone said earlier today, there's that trust factor. You just took my kid, how can I trust you? But at the same time, nobody else knows that I should show up to court half an hour or 45 minutes early so that mine's the first name on the duty counsel list. So I at least meet with somebody, so I have someone in court with me. No one else has told me to bring someone with me as a form of support, because this is not easy. So then it's an extremely hard balance.